Hey guys, this is Curtis from Gray & Patina. We're kickstarting off a new series called In Depth. In this series, what we're hoping to do is not just give you the speeds and feeds of a certain reference, but really kind of give you our perspective and our take, how a watch wears, what we like and what we dislike about it, and most importantly, you know, the collectability and ownership that's involved in a certain reference. So I'm super excited that the first series that we're kicking off with is one of my favorite references. It's the 666 or 16660 Sea Dweller. I really don't think this watch gets a lot of spotlight in a sea of Submariners, 14060s, 16800s. It's often overlooked, and probably the model that gets the most attention is the matte dial variant of this model. But I think there's a good case to be made for the gloss dial as well. So we're gonna get into that. This watch was kickstarted in 1978 in parallel with the 16665, its predecessor. So Rolex, in similar Rolex fashion in that 70s and 80s period, was producing both models at the same time. What you should keep in mind is that from 1978 to 1983, there was a matte dial variant of this watch. So it's almost a carryover from the 16665 type of dials. In 1984, thereabouts, Rolex introduced what they're still producing today, which is gloss black dials with a white gold surrounding the luminescent material. So these watches were all made with tritium. So if you see one that is luminova or that still glows, it's likely a service dial or it's likely been relumed. What I think is most interesting about this watch is the case dimensions. Now, it's very hard to translate this virtually through you guys. You really have to kind of see it in person. And we're going to do our best to kind of showcase that. But this watch, when compared to, I have a 14060 on my left here. They look very similar from afar, right? Sometimes their sea dwellers are often mistaken for Submariners, vice versa. The key thing here is that they wear very, very differently. The 14060 Submariner will sit much, much flatter on the wrist, whereas the 666 is going to be about 25% thicker, if not a little bit more. But Rolex just didn't increase the thickness of the 666 to achieve that 4,000 feet depth rating. What is really, I think, unique about the look of this watch is that the dial itself is a little bit smaller than a Submariner of that same generation. So that includes a 16800 or 14060. This smaller dial and a chunkier case makes this wear like a completely different watch. And this is what I really like about the experience of wearing and dailying a Sea Dweller, where if I wanted the most versatile watch that I can wear with a suit or that I could wear with jeans, I would pick a Submariner. But if I was only to wear something that is typically like daily wear, jeans, denim jacket, Carhartts, whatever, the Sea Dweller presents an interesting case because it just seems like a tank of a watch. To me, it's the tank of the neo vintage lineup, where someone that may feel like wearing vintage is a little bit fragile in certain cases. I think a case can be made on the 666 where you could basically hammer and nail with this. Don't try that, but that's what it feels like. So we're gonna talk to Joe, our watchmaker, and he's gonna kind of break down the movement and this really interesting helium escape valve that's unique to the Sea Dweller lineup. All right, Joe, so I've got the 666 for you to kind of just break apart and show us the movement. What do you think of this watch?
I love the Sea Dwellers in all shapes and form, but this is one of my favorites. Very robust platform, introduction of a newer movement. And as you know, I don't like the Cyclops, so I love a model that does not have a Cyclops. So,
do you? So I know on this 666 model, one of the major improvements for this was the, enlarged helium escape valve on this versus the kind of the dinky one on the 1665.
So on the 1665, they were having issues with the helium valve. Predominantly, they were finding that it was causing a lot of leak. A lot of the issues from leaking was from the valve. So in this generation, the valve is way more robust, and they pretty much solved that problem. So they went with a much bigger valve, and they went with a different material as well.
Cool. Let's break it apart.
Let's check it out.
So as a rule for kind of vintage Rolexes of this time period, what type of servicing do you recommend if nothing's been done, or what's a precaution, or like what's an easy precautionary service?
If you're planning on going into the water with this watch, I would at least have it water tested in a professional water testing equipment. And at the very least, change the O-rings and gaskets, which is not an invasive thing, and I actually recommend that on any watch, especially vintage watches. Generally, the gaskets are not kept up and they could be dry. Any sport model usually has a little bit more gaskets than a regular model, and also this having the extra helium valve, it houses an extra gasket. So just off the bat, we can see the back gasket. If we pay attention here, we can see a tube gasket. Within the tube itself, there's several other gaskets housed. So all of those gaskets are working in combination to keep water out, and they're all subject to wear, just like any other rubber or urethane material. So gaskets are important. They should be changed every couple of years if you're not using it in water, every year, maybe even more often if you go into water and salt water especially.
And then more gaskets on the helium escape valve as well.
So the helium escape valve is actually used for saturation diving. It is not actually used underwater. So certain divers who have to work underwater for a period of time, so they don't have to go to constant decompression, which is not good for the body, they will live in a bell that is pressurized to the pressure and the depth they're working at, so they don't have to constantly go through decompression. In that chamber, you breathe a mixture of helium and oxygen, and the helium molecules are small enough to penetrate the case, gaskets.
Wow.
And pressure can build up inside the watch, and the watch can explode. That valve will vent that helium out if that occurs.
And it's a passive function, right? It's not something you have to like depress.
On this model, it's a passive function. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm Mike Heyman, watch collector, Southern California watch hunter, and one of the people that started the Chrono Group in OC Chrono. So the Sea Dweller, to me, and the 666 in particular, it's that watch that when you put it on, you know it was built for a purpose. There's a very specific thing this watch was meant to do, and that's to go down to greater depths than at the time, you know, any other offering, at least commercially available offering that Rolex had. And you contrast that with the sub and the 14060, which to me is actually one of the best subs, yeah, for a bunch of reasons. And I feel like in this day and age of watches and Rolex in particular, the sub is, well, it's a little more expected. It's a little more anticipated. People, you know, see that design on your wrist and they think sub. It may not be a sub. It may be a Sea Dweller, but they think sub. And instantly, you know, as you wear these watches and you hold them, you just know that one was kind of made to do everything. It was made to certainly be in the water. It was made to be traveling around the world. It was made occasionally to be under a suit cuff. But one was made to do something very specific. It was meant to go in the water. It was meant to go deep. It was meant to take infinitely more abuse than a lot of other watches. And I don't know, you know, some people might think it's not as versatile. I think that you could wear it in a lot of different ways, but it's very specific. The first Sea Dweller I acquired I was worried about it. Yeah, I was really worried that I would have that experience, that it would be after a few days, I'm not feeling it. This is just too big. It sits too high off my wrist. And if you look at the specifications, everything you read in the specs tells you it should be too big. You know, it's not what your average, Submariner person is looking for in terms of the specs. But then you put it on, and actually it does something very differently. Visually, it does have a little more heft. I mean, I don't take the time to weigh watches, and I feel bad for people like Jimmy who do. But, you know, for me, It wears so much smaller in a really great way. I'm not looking for a particularly small watch, but this watch just seems, the 666 just seems to sit on the wrist in some ways better. The word overbuilt, creeps into the conversation when you talk about the Sea Dweller. And overbuilt, anytime you say anything's over anything, there instantly could be a negative connotation with that, it's too much. But overbuilt in this case is really a good thing. I mean, overbuilt means that this watch is going to be on your wrist for as long as you want it to be.